Hola chicos y chicas. Today we're going to be talking about indirect objects and indirect object pronouns. And you will see that these are very similar to your direct object and direct object pronoun sentences. Not the same, but quite similar. So if you look at your notes right after the vocabulary section, you will see an indirect object section. So first we have to define an indirect object and figure out where the indirect object would be in the sentence before we can rewrite sentences or abbreviate sentences. So an indirect object tells to whom or for whom the action of the verb is being done, and it tells who is receiving the direct object in the sentence. Okay, that sounds a little complicated, but if I show you the example, Mrs. Young gives the homework to the students. Okay, you'd have to ask, to whom does Mrs. Young give the homework? She gives the homework to the students. So that means the students are the indirect object in the sentence. Okay, in a Spanish sentence, the indirect object always comes after, okay, right here, after the preposition a. And sometimes it's also going to be the word para. Okay, but most of the time it's going to be the word a. So if you look at the sentence down below, el peluquero le cortó el pelo a la señora. Okay, the hair was cut for the woman. Or in other words, the hairdresser cut the woman's hair. So if I look at that sentence, I find the a, and then I know anything that comes after it is going to be, oops, the indirect object in the sentence. Okay, so the a la señora is the indirect object because for whom is the hairdresser cutting the hair? For the woman. Okay, sometimes though, I want to abbreviate those sentences just like I did before. So for example, in this first sentence, you can see, un banquero le prestó dinero a Juan. Okay, so a banker lent money to Juan, or lent Juan the money. So I look for my a, and anything that comes after it is my indirect object. Okay, but what if I want to abbreviate that sentence to say a banker lent him money? So in that case, I'm going to get rid of the a Juan and replace it with an indirect object pronoun. Okay, and you'll see in a minute that the indirect object pronoun that would go with Juan would be le. So the abbreviated version, un banquero le prestó, and that's supposed to say dinero, not diner. Okay, so now it says a banker lent him money instead of a banker lent money to Juan. Okay, so here are your indirect object pronouns, and you'll probably recognize them because they are the same pronouns that we use with gustar. So they are me, te, le, nos, and les. Okay, me is going to mean me. Te would be you informal. Le would be him, her, or you formal. Nos would be us. And les can mean them or you all. Okay, so next we're going to fill in some verbs that are commonly associated with indirect object pronouns. We're going to conjugate them, and I'll also give you some examples of sentences that might use these verbs. So dar is the first verb that we're going to go over. And as you know, dar means to give. And we conjugate it with doy, das, da, damos, and dan. And an example using dar and an indirect object pronoun would be something like the sentence we used at the beginning. Señora joven da la tarea a los estudiantes. She gives the homework to the students. So this part of the sentence, a los estudiantes, would be the indirect object. Okay, another verb that commonly uses indirect object pronouns is decir. And we conjugate decir with yo digo, tú dices, él, ella, usted dice, nosotros decimos, and ellos, ellas, ustedes dicen. So decir is a stem-changing verb, and it also has an irregular yo. So an example of decir that would use an indirect object in the sentence might be something like, I tell the news to my friend Juan. Yo digo las noticias a mi amigo Juan. So anything that comes after the a is the indirect object. So this whole thing, mi amigo Juan, is the indirect object in the sentence. So what we need to learn how to do is fill in these blanks with indirect object pronouns based on the indirect object in each sentence. And then I also want to show you how to abbreviate these sentences a little bit. So for example, number 1 is saying, yo blank doy el regalo a mi madre. So that sentence says, I give the gift to my mom. Okay, but if we have an indirect object in the sentence, which we do, a mi madre, then we also have to have an indirect object pronoun before the conjugated verb. Okay, so based on my chart from a couple pages ago, I need to choose an indirect object pronoun that I could use with mi madre. Okay, so what I'm going to change that sentence to say is I give the gift to her. So I need an indirect object pronoun that matches the pronoun her. And based on this chart, that is going to be le. So when I look at this example, I need to fill in the blank with le. Okay? Now, if I want to abbreviate that sentence to say I give the gift to her instead of I give the gift to my mom, all I have to do is get rid of the a and anything that comes after the a. So my new abbreviated sentence would just be yo le doy el regalo. I give the gift to her. Okay, let's do another one. So in the second sentence, what is the indirect object? Well, I have to find the a and what comes after it. So in this case, it's nosotros. Okay, and I need to choose a pronoun that would match nosotros. Okay, and as I think you know, that would be nos. Okay, and if I want to abbreviate that sentence, I have to get rid of the a and the nosotros. And when I rewrite it, it will say ella nos dice las noticias. So the only difference between this sentence and this sentence is that this one says she tells the news to us, and this one says she tells us the news. So it's only slightly abbreviated. All right, we'll do one more, and then I would like you to try 4 and 5. So number 3, I'm finding the a and what comes after it. Okay, I have to choose a pronoun that would match a, me. So that would be me. And to rewrite that sentence, I would say él me da las flores. So I've gotten rid of the a, me. Okay, I want you guys to try 4 and 5, please, and I'm going to check them next class. Okay, a little more difficult on the bottom, we're going from English to Spanish. So first I need to figure out in these sentences what the indirect objects are. So in English, the student gives the gift to her. To whom does the student give the gift? To her. So that's my indirect object. Number 2, my mom makes the soup for me. For whom does she make the soup? For me. Okay, they tell me the truth. To whom do they tell the truth? To me. We bring the pizza to them. To whom do we bring the pizza? To them. And you give the homework to her. To whom do you give the homework? You give it to her. Okay, so I've underlined all the indirect objects in the sentence. Now I need to figure out what pronouns I would use to replace those. Okay, so to her, I would use lay. For me, I would use may. Tell me the truth again, I'm going to use may. Number 4, we bring the pizza to them. I would use lace. And to her, I would use lay. Okay, and that's all based off of the chart that we filled out on indirect object pronouns. So now that I've figured out what pronouns I'm going to use to replace those, I can go ahead and cross those out. And now I need to rewrite these sentences in Spanish. So if I think about the student gives, okay, the student gives would be el estudiante da el regalo. The student gives the gift. Okay, but I want to say the student gives her the gift. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, just like I did with direct object pronouns, I'm going to put that indirect object pronoun before the conjugated verb. So my new sentence, el estudiante le da el regalo. Okay, number 2, my mom makes the soup for me. So just to show you an example, I'm going to write that whole sentence out first in Spanish. So mi madre hace la sopa para mí. Okay, and I've already established that that para mí is what I'm getting rid of. And I'm going to use may to replace the para mí. My marker's not really working today, sorry guys. So I can get rid of this para mí part. And when I rewrite the sentence, the may has to go before the conjugated verb, just like it did before. So mi madre me hace la sopa. Okay, we'll do one more. I want you guys to try 4 and 5. So they tell me the truth. Okay, so the they tell part would be ellos dicen the truth, la verdad, a mí. Okay, so I'm getting rid of a mí and replacing it with may, and it has to go before the conjugated verb. So when I rewrite it, it will look like that. Ellos me dicen la verdad. Okay, so again, these are extremely similar to your direct object pronouns. There's just a new list of pronouns. You have me, te, le, nos, and les. Okay, I want you guys to try 4 and 5 on both of those parts, and I will check next time that they are done. Please also jot down any questions that you have. If you're confused about something, please don't hesitate to ask me those questions next class. Okay, gracias por mirar y tengan un buen día. Adiós.